Good evening and a warm welcome to today's session. I am Sushmita Devisetti from Upgrad. I hope everyone is safe and healthy. So, just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the webinar, apart from the one you've asked in the registration form, please type them in the Q&A form. I'll bring them up at the end. So, now without further ado, we will turn to our topic 7 effective steps to write your SOP. Today, we have our expert panelist, Mr. Praneeth Singh, with us. Praneeth is an alumnus of the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education. He has been a founder of 2 startups in India. Praneeth is currently serving as the head of school partnerships at Upgrad. Welcome, Praneeth. Glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. Wish you all a very good evening. Again, on behalf of Upgrad, we warmly welcome you. So we're going to speak about SOPs, and I am sure most of you are either graduates of high school or you're almost done with your bachelor degrees and are about to enter into your masters. So we're going to speak about the why, how, and what of SOPs. To begin with, I will answer one of the most important questions on behalf of all of you. What is an SOP? An SOP is basically called a statement of purpose, and it gives all of you who are applying to universities a huge opportunity to present information that cannot be conveyed through empirical or objective data. You can give all of that, you can extend it, express it in a clear, direct, and concise way to explain your interests, your motivation, your goals, and your special talent. Now, one of the things is that you should know is SOP is one integral part of your college admission process, and it carries in itself the power to make or break your application. As well as your SOP is the best way you have to stand out amongst the many applicants these universities receive on a daily basis. So it's going to help you distinguish yourself from the grades, because I'm sure almost all of you are a lot more than your GPA, right? So to address one more important question before we begin the webinar, why do schools ask for it, and what are the questions on their mind when they assess an SOP? So let me give you 3 or 4 ways how a university seeks an SOP or a college essay from you. One is called a statement of purpose. One is called a personal statement. They can ask you 3 or 4 long length questions that ultimately coalesce to become an SOP, or they can ask you for a letter of intent. All of them broadly mean that they're trying to assess 4 basic things. 1, why do you want to study at the university level? 2, why do you want to study that specific course in that specific university? 3, what experience do you have in your field which is relevant? And 4th, and the last thing that they want to know from you is what do you plan to do with your degree once you have that, right? Now, jumping into the topic, an SOP is basically a bridge between your past experiences and the future that you want to build through that chosen program at a university. So everything that's behind you in the past 20 years or 21 or 17 or 18, you have to condense all of it into 2 pages, which is broadly going to help the university decide that what role will their program or their faculty play in making sure you can achieve your goals in your career path. An SOP has to majorly focus on what you want to do during the course of the degree, but here is what you have to highlight. So just giving you a check here, make sure you are investing more of your time in trying to listen to what I have to say. We give you the complete liberty to take screenshots of the slides, but if you are too invested or consumed by the data on the slides, you would probably miss out on most of the things that I have to say to you, which is going to be between the lines. So make sure you hear me out. You can please feel free to take any screenshots that you want to take. Now, An SOP should highlight 6 major things: your academic strengths, your background, all the internships or relevant experiences or everything you've done beyond your schooling or university if you're a bachelor student applying for a master's program. Third, your personal goals. It is extremely important for the university to know what do you envision for yourself. This should include both your goals right away, which are your short-term goals, and your long-term goals. Maybe your short-term goal is that you want to evolve into a research fellow at the university, but the long-term goal is you ultimately want to be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Fourth, your research interests. Which research genre do you want to pioneer in? And fifth, your specific skill set, your special skill set. What is it that makes you stand out or special than everybody else? And sixth, the vision, your vision for your future, your vision for the career path that you wish lies after your university. And like I mentioned to you, SOP is highly used by the admissions team to figure out whether you're the right fit of the program for the course that you've applied for. One important question that I'm sure most of you have is who reads all of these? Here is what you should know. Whichever program or department you're applying to, one of the members of the faculty of that school, the business school or law school or XYZ school, they read your SOP, right? So here is one important thing that you should know with regards to that. These people from the faculty will never look at the SOP as the first step. They will look at all the empirical data in your application, your grades, your transcripts, your test scores, even the letter of recommendations before reading the SOP. So what are they trying to really do here? My point to you guys is while they do all of that, while they go through all the empirical data in your file, they're trying to spot out the peculiarities that they want you should explain. If there's a gap in your years of study, if you spend more than the usual time on finishing your school or your college, and if you left your college in the middle of the degree to start working and then you finished college later, or you changed fields, maybe you were great in science, you had science as your stream in school, but now you're studying something entirely else. So for you to explain that is why they actually refer to an SOP. So instead of falling into a trap of defending yourself, as in why did you take that step, you can point out the actual reasons that led to the challenges, but more importantly, highlight how you decided to navigate that scenario, because they want to know how much can you persevere to get to your goals in the face of adversity. That is one important thing. So if you're on this webinar listening to me and you have a semester where you scored all C's or even D's, it is absolutely fine. You have to have a strong reason behind it and take some time and sort of invest in a few lines to explain whatever happened. I am sure they will take into account all of that. Now, we've always heard, right, that SOP is one of the biggest tools that universities use to make sure if you're going to be a part of them or not. But let me explain one more thing to you. An SOP in itself is one of the biggest opportunities that you have to demonstrate some of the most imperative and integral skill set that you need in a university student. One, communication. If you're entering into a university, and especially if you're going to do your master's now, writing is going to be a major chunk of your job at the university. Communication is going to be one of the major chunk of your job at the university. So how do you move the reader? How do you captivate the reader? How do you put 20 years of your life into 2 pages in a persuasive, effective manner? 2, like I said, your ability to move the reader and making sure your story stands out of everybody else's that they're trying to read. Now, just so you know, they're reading lakhs and lakhs of SOPs, and they have about 500 seats in the school of your choice. So one of your major goals is to make sure they always remember your story. And third, your ability to structure and merge everything that you have to say in a manner that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. When you're actually completing the SOP, it looks like one finished package. Everything that you've put down is very sequentially set up. Like I mentioned to you, it is going to play an enormously instrumental role in getting yourself accepted or declined by your university. Now, just so I make sure that you know the basic outline of the SOP, make sure here is what you need to know. A compelling SOP is going to convince the reader, which is going to be a part of the department for faculty at the university. You have to convince them that you are the kind of students who is the most likely to thrive in the course in which you've been admitted, and who would add value to and not merely benefit from the university's academic community. So you just don't have to mention about, here is what I'm going to learn, here is this. You also have to tell them what is it that you bring to the university, right? So I'm going to just sort of put down, how do you introduce yourself? Because of course your outline or anything starts with introduction. Now, remember, SOP, and if there's a school that asks for a personal statement, these both are very different. Majorly, a high school student can be asked for both of these, but anybody who's applying for masters will only be asked for your SOP. Now, an SOP is supposed to be very formal, so you cannot spend more than 1 or 2 lines talking about yourself, as in your personal self or what your habits are or XYZ. You have to introduce yourself in a unique manner in just 1 line, but try spending time in demonstrating your passion for the field. Tell us a story about how it started. Take us back to childhood or any event in your life that birthed or sort of from where your interest in the field emerged. I can give you one very important example, but prior to that, make sure when I say your SOP is very important, that doesn't mean it has to be boring. So make sure to distinguish your essay. You add very relevant as well as unique information. And one of the best ways to do that is talk about or write about an idea in your field that stimulates your mind, that turns you on intellectually. It is the most effective essay opener. And remember, the idea that you choose to talk about can tell the admissions committee a lot about you, and it demonstrates your interest in your field rather than just describing it. Especially if you're trying to go to Harvard or UPenn or Oxford, some of the best schools in the world, you've got to do that. I can give you a very relevant example here. Now look at the statement and how it begins. The SOP begins with almost minimal information about who the applicant is. As a child born and raised in Delhi, I never question XYZ. And so he or she talks about the culture that he or she comes from, and that the culture reinforces that everything in our lives comes from the amount, from the amount of wealth to everything else, to our diseases or health issues, is a consequence of a prior action. So he talks about his city and the culture he comes from. But towards the end, and that's the most effective way to start, he talks about, however, I began to question this belief and I chose a biology-focused syllabus in his school, and he learned about inherited traits, gene function, expression, and regulation. Look, job done. He's not trying to add anything fluffy, but put down right there where it all began, right? Next. Now, before I get here, just for you guys to know, I'm going to share with you through the slides some of the most important questions that are going to play an integral part in the outline of your SOP. Again, to repeat myself, just take a screenshot of these as bullet points and make sure you answer these in very brief comments or statements. While you do that, concentrate on your life experiences and give very specific examples. put it down on a notebook, and finally, from all of the points or comments or statements or life experiences, then choose the central theme that stands out or dominates your reflections. Here is where you have to do a lot of self-reflection, right? So you can take a screenshot. I wouldn't want to waste a lot of time repeating it, but majorly has to do with, why do you want to do this? Why is this the specific, field for your majors or for pursuing your research? Especially, this also talks about your academic why, right? So why are you doing this academically? What is it that really appealed to you that a university already does, or our degree makes you do? What is it about us, right? And of course, what you want to do after completing the degree with us. Then you talk about your past experiences. You talk about how long they lasted. I will also go down in depth with what past experiences can you mention. And you can talk about every time that you volunteered in your life, and how is your experience. Again, guys, make sure you remember one major rule of thumb. Never write down anything in your SOP that is not relevant to the topic, which, or the course, or the degree that you're applying for. Just crop out everything which is nowhere relevant, because let me remind you one more time, universities are not looking for absolute intelligence. They need relative intelligence in that field. So if you're the smartest guy, the most experienced, the most well researched, the most intrigued child to pursue that area of research or majors, you're the one, not the one who's done almost every great thing in life. No, even if you've done every great thing in your life, you just need to put down very specific things, right? So, like I mentioned, when you take down bullet points, make sure you're talking about very concrete life experiences with specific examples, right? Then you talk about your goals.
Pranit, I just have a small doubt.
Sure.
So regarding, you were talking about experiences, right?
Right.
So as a person, I pursued my master's or my graduation with history, economics, and political science.
Right.
But later I moved on to MBA stream.
Right.
So whatever experience I had, it is not at all relevant to the field of MBA.
Right.
So how can I write some points which are related to the new field that I'm going to enter?
Absolutely fine. Right. So when you navigate, or when you're trying to maneuver from one field to the other, the universities seek out which major are you typically keen on, what area do you want to do your MBA in, and what led you to do that. And if you do not have any past experiences which is linked, they want you to focus on the other aspects of university life, because one part is you have to make them believe that you come from a very relevant background, but one equally important part is you fulfill a very important part of the university campus, which is diversity. So you're bringing a very diverse, out of the box, different mindset, out of the status quo mind to the university or the course, right? So then they want you to talk about other integral parts of university life in your comprehension. 1, 2, they want you to talk about why are you making that shift, and 3, if not past, they want you to link it to the future. That what is it that through your past, whatever past it may have been, you're now moving to MBA, and what do you do with both of these together, right? How is it that we can support your journey in making sure your future goals can be achieved through us, right? So both of these merged, you can make a very effective statement of purpose. Hope I sort of answered your question, right?
Yes, I got it.
All right. So when you talk about goals, you talk about the future goals. 1, you have 2 options. 1 is you want to pass out after getting your degree, and that you want to move to being a CEO, or you want to move to pursue science, or you want to be, you want to be a lawyer. One thing is you want to finish your research in the university. Maybe you want to go ahead for a PhD. So you have to very clearly demarcate what is it that you're looking for. What are your goals? What are your goals in terms of your work life? Third, how is it that we can help you accomplish your goals, which may be very unique in nature? Again, guys, when I talk about uniqueness, equally important is that you're not trying to replicate somebody else's goals. You have very authentic goals, and you clearly lay out a very moving reason of why do you need this course to fulfill that goal, or you will fail in your pursuit of that goal, right? And fourth, what aspects do you bring to the school department or the degree that you're going to be doing? What is it that you bring with yourself, right? And these are some basic things. You can just take a screenshot. They are going to be anyway explicitly asked from every school that why do you want to do this? As in they're going to question your why, right? Now, we're talking about research here. This has to go down to an extreme level where you browse through the websites, the brochures, the booklets of every university that you're trying to apply to, every course that you're applying to, every department that you're applying to, and you highlight the aspects of every program that you're applying to. You read up. So some universities also will expect you, especially when you're doing masters, when you're doing your PhD, to let the university know which faculty member do you want to work with. And you know what that demands of you? That demands of you to research about them and research about what areas of interest do they have, does most of their work lie in. You're expected to study all of that and tell the university what from their research is it that you extremely liked, and which is why you want to be a fellow with them, and you want to research further. So what inspired you, right? So some of the times, one more thing that you are going to be expected, especially if there's somebody here who is applying to his master's, who is applying to his PhD, is you have to browse through recent researches that are happening in your field of interest and try to get a general understanding of how the field is developing and what are the existential challenges that the world faces. That is something the universities want to know, because when you well researched, it has a lot to say about your passion. Because you know what? Why is it important to convince them for this? It's important because they should know that you understand the scope of research in your discipline, and you're aware of the research trends, and you are way more informed to make this decision than any other child in the set of students who apply. Now, let me give you one more hack. Remember, I told you, one person from the faculty is going to be assessing the SOP and not the admissions team. When they read about the terminology that you use, that is what they use, they're going to be increasingly inspired to take you on, because they want that if you're already at a wavelength where they may have to invest a year into some else student's journey to get them at the wavelength you already are because of your research, you're going to be the pick. So show them that you've thoroughly researched the program, the faculty, the university, and why are you applying to this program specifically. I can give you a very valid example for this. Now, you will have to sort of, pardon me for the random jargon, but most students, they simply write generic stuff like I was simply impressed by your university and the importance it gives to research. I'd like to study here because the university really values international university really respects international kids, and the importance you give do research. You have 20 Nobel Prize winners. You have 100 PhD topics. No. That is not how you do it. The admissions team knows how great their university is. They don't need you from one part of the world to tell them that the college that you're applying to is great, which is why you're applying in the first place. Here is how you can shape that. I would fully utilize the resources that the Wallenberg Hall gives to the students, a 24/7 science laboratory that gives a lot of focus on student research for molecular chemistry. That is the exact kind of opportunity I am looking for, because I can see myself working in those labs day and night. I will especially want to study under Dr. Mark, as I have been an avid follower and admirer of his work in the field of quantum chemistry, which is not only the field I would choose for my research study, but also a topic that I'm extremely zealous about personally. So I would be very honored if I could earn a spot in that research group. I am sure it's the second one that you will fall for if you were going to be assessing me, right? That is how we expect, or how a general university will expect you to be doing, right? Then you have to lay down some focus on who you are, especially when you talk about why you are the right pick for the university. So here you can reflect on your intellectual development, and when you make a bullet point of this slide, when you're taking down some brief comments, think about these three things, okay? One, what and when were the major moments in your life that have led you to your current research interests? What were the major moments in your life? Maybe the slide which I showed you where the child talks about when he took up bio. Maybe it was working with somebody at the university level. Maybe it was some conference that you visited through the school, which inspired you, all of that. Second, what or who influenced your decision or interest? What quality of them appeal to you? So here's one thing that you can do. If you happen to follow somebody's work in your field who is highly influential and carries a lot of authority in that field, mention them. Mention that you follow their work and that you're extremely inspired. And third, describe why you are the best fit for the program in terms of your values, and why the program is a great fit for you, and as well as you for the university. Now, again, remember, there is no harm in trying to talk about your achievements and what have you done. But most SOPs go astray when the applicant tends to believe that the purpose is to persuade the reader that the person is highly qualified for a general admission. No, they're not seeking that. As a general reminder, they're not seeking that. They are looking towards finding a strong evidence through your SOP. वो आपकी grades देख चुके हैं. They have seen almost everything relevant. They are looking if your program that you applied for will really mesh with your interests and ambitions, and if you devote the statement to a list of great things that you've done, then you will merely annoy the reader. He or she does not have any time to read about all the great things you've done. They want to know about relevant things. Towards the last, I will also show you the complete SOP. So there's somebody who's asking for an SOP PDF. I will show you. You can take screenshots from there. Now, these are some of the past experiences that you can mention, especially when we are asked what can you mention about your past. All of these 7 points can be sort of shared or can be put down. But here's one important tip. You have to quantify your stories. What does that mean? Look, you can either have your SOP be read as a newspaper, or it can be read as a novel. A novel will lead me on to keep reading it until it ends. A newspaper, simply facts, simply data being thrown at my face, right? And so that means, to have me interested, intrigued, your story, whenever you talk about your past, must contain measurable experiences instead of just stories. So, for example, if you have worked for a local NGO, you were trying to teach math to primary kids, right? You could say, one way to say it is, during my high school or university days, I helped a local NGO by joining as a math coach, where I taught basic math to school kids. Even though it sounds fair enough, it does not give the reader the entire picture and certainly no clue about the impact you make. How about this? During my second year of university or during my high school, I joined Teach Math, a local NGO where I was a part of the math coaching team. For a course of 10 months, I taught basic math like algebra and geometry to more than 35th and 6th grade students. And every single student I taught to secured an A in math that year. I've never felt prouder of myself in my life. That's the sort of impact I want you guys to have when you write your SOP. So do you see the difference? These numbers suddenly give a whole new perspective to the readers, and the respect for you is suddenly multiplied. That's the power of numbers. They give you authenticity, they give you authority. And so you can use the same strategy for the rest of your story, for the rest of the statement, no matter what it is about, whether it is some research project, some school project, some college fest that you convened, any experience, add numbers to your stories and make them sound more realistic, right? A very simple. Yes.
We have a question from one of our attendees. Okay,
Sure.
so it is from DR. So the question is, how to write SOP as a recent graduate wanting to pursue masters with little or no experience? So you're talking about people who have a little bit of experience, but how, as a recent graduate who have only experience, in pursuing academic stuff, but not in a real life experience, what are the tips for them?
Absolutely fine. So for somebody like that, the one of the ways you can mention about what your past is like, I'm just going to cover a few points. Maybe I can go back to the slide and we can talk about what else can they experience if point 3 is deemed invalid for them. So if they don't have a work experience, right? So we can talk about a few things. Now, we're talking about two different things here. One, certain master's degrees need you to have an experience, but certain do not require any experience prior to pursuing the degree. So it's going to be completely fine. Please don't feel like you fall short on the chances of you getting enrolled. I can mention, like ma'am asked, a few of things that you can mention. So point number one, you can of course mention your experience in your university or experience in your school, certain academic skills that you've learned from your lab or when you were doing a research, when you were studying, when you studied about something beyond school, whatever is feasible, viable, give specific examples about any academic experience that you've had that inspired an interest in you. Second, you can talk about any research that you had conducted yourself or with somebody during school, during college. And third, any thesis or any project or any research paper that you may have worked on. So no work experience is imperative. Second, demography. Are there any special circumstances that you went through with your age, gender, race, your culture? Do you have any significant multicultural experiences? Because one of the things that top schools in the world look out for is that how well can you blend with the campus culture, right? So if you've worked or you've studied with some kids from all different parts of the world, from all parts of India, mention that. And then, did you grow up in a low income community and you had certain limited resources, still managed to do it against all odds? And how did your parents or grandparents' educational level or their occupation inspire to do it? That is number 3. Then number 4, if you don't have a work experience, you can mention about if you've done something particular, you've led certain initiative, certain effort, certain campus event, whatever you've done in your life that required you to lead from the front, that required you to step up, take a challenge. Talk about that. Talk about numbers. Talk about anything you've done For your community, you can also talk about, yeah, supposedly you can talk about studying abroad, or you can talk about travel if you've done that in the past, if you've been on a school trip or XYZ, what did that teach you about that culture of the country you're applying to? But again, only relevant stuff. And the number 6 and 7, just simple skill set, as in, what makes you unique. You can add some stories with numbers here to move. You can also choose number 7th, which is the last point, that if you exercise good judgment and you have been extremely intrinsically motivated and driven to do certain humanity plus things in your life, if you can persevere, if you're very honest, if you you have extended compassion in your life, anything that is relevant, that talks about how will you fit into student community, talk about that, right? So we can move to the next thing. Also, one of the things for the one who asked me this, you can also express your strength in communication, planning, solving problems, solving challenges. These are some of the most futuristic skills that every workplace or university wants to know. Can you solve complex problems? If you've done that in the past, talk about it, right? Or any special courses that you've taken, talk about it. Maybe if you haven't taken that, one thing you can do is you can go to upgrad.com, take up some free or some paid courses in your field, and then you can talk about what you learned there, right? Some certain do's and don'ts. You have to use simple, clear, concise language. Do not fall for fancy, gigantic vocabulary. Do not do ghostwriting. Do not get somebody else to write your SOP. And remember the last point. Since faculty will be the ones reviewing your SOP, it is fine to use discipline-specific terminology, tone, and style in your SOP. That will definitely get you some traction. Also remember, please do not use random weird fonts. Use 12-point Times New Roman, 1-inch line margin, and 1.5 line spacing, right? Do's and don'ts, you can take a screenshot of this. One of the biggest don'ts is, please, for heaven's sake, do not use the same SOP for all universities. Universities are extremely, extremely different in terms of their values, in terms of the university culture, in terms of there are certain universities are experts in certain areas of interest, areas of research only. So you have to make sure that you specifically recognize that, right? And then
Praneeth, just a second. So one of our participants have a question that, is there any specific length that a SOP should be of? I mean, maybe a number of words, a number of pages.
Right. So the right answer is almost every university has a set perspective on this. They have sometimes explicitly mentioned on the application page. There's mostly 1 to 2 to even 3 pages sometimes, or can have a word limit. But just so all of you know, make sure you consume all the limit and compose the essay with, having used all of the limit being given to you, maybe 10 minus, but do not exceed with even one more word. Please do not exceed with even one extra word. Rather, you can keep 5 or 10 down, right? Because this, like I mentioned, is one of the biggest opportunity to demonstrate your skills, to structure the content and make sure how do you actually, put down all facts, figures, experiences that have come from you, right? And the 7th tip, prior to me sharing the different ways of how you can write the SOP, is that each SOP should be tailored to the requirements of the school, like I mentioned. Each university adopts a different research methodology. Their objectives and ideologies differ. One thing you can also do is almost every university in America, Canada, Australia, all of them have a specific page dedicated to this. So you can take a screenshot, make sure you were following this template. So make sure you're making notes here. You start with introduction. Introduction does not imply about you. It implies your It implies the fact that you have to introduce your academic field of interest and write about why this course interests you. All that which I spoke about already. Introduction to your background, to everything you've done beyond university, in university, apart from university, all the education and experiences you've received. Then you talk about why this course. You can take a screenshot. I'm going to pause for 5 seconds. All right. Then you mention your goals. Again, your short-term goals and your long-term 10-year goals, and specifically, explicitly mention how is that university or that degree going to help you advance towards your goal, advance towards your mission, your value, your vision. And then you move to why this university must specify why you seek admission in this university only. Make sure you are very well researched to the extent that you also find the faculty members on LinkedIn and see to as to what research are they doing. And then you finally conclude, which is the most important thing, that you sum up in a para everything that you've written so far and engage them in the final lines of your SOP. How you do that, I will just take you through. So I'll give you 2 seconds to take a quick picture and then we move ahead. All right. So
Pranit,
yes.
Just a second. So the participants have a question that is this SOP only, for applying to universities or colleges, or whether when this can also be used when we apply to interviews. For example, there are FANG companies or the national 3 big companies who expect us to write some SOP. So why do you want to work with us? What are your future goals? So can this SOP procedure be used during the interviews also?
Right, absolutely fine. So what you can ideally do is, most of the companies that we apply to normally ask for a letter of intent for that specific role. In that, it's just that the research has to be changed a lot towards making sure you assess and study the job role very well. You know about the department you're applying to, and you're very well informed about what that department does, who the clients are going to be, what job role, what skill set. The good part is, in a good job role from a good firm, everything is mentioned outrightly. So this can be used. However, make sure that your focus of research then is that job role and the company page and everything you can find about what problem are they solving for the world, what values, and what is the reason they started this, and the specific vertical that you're trying to join. What is that vertical ideally trying to do, and how much growth have they already witnessed? Where are they trying to go with this role that you are applying for? Depends on what scale are you applying, but yes, it can be used. Of course, yes, right? But make sure, sometimes all firms ask for very specific type of questions. They ask for a letter of intent or a cover. So make sure you're reading what they're asking for. You must not be answering something which is not asked from you, right? So I have already mentioned to you about this slide. Second, background. So you note here how how he or she makes sure that when they're applying, they're also telling the reader that this interest began in high school, but they took it forward and they engaged in rigorous coursework. So the reader would love to know that the person actually followed his interests. And so then he or she talks about he also or she also enrolled. So what additional things they did to go deep into the field. And finally, the next thing in yellow, the applicant specifically tries to focus on his ability to lead, that he was working under somebody, but eventually assumed responsibility and reinforce his conviction to desire to pursue a research. So you can take a screenshot. Towards the end, the person who's applying mentions which techniques has he mastered. So from developing a very basic generic interest in school, here's where he's reached, right? And then the next thing, he or she mentions about all the research they've done under a 10-week summer course, and where all have they sort of made sure that the research goes. Who are they working under? Like I mentioned, somebody who carries a lot of authority. And then he or she mentions that they've had a more focused area of research. And here is where they've reached. Finally, and some of the topics that he also did was this. So he's going deep down into how much he or she knows about that field and where has he already reached. So remember, it's not about absolute intelligence, it's about relative intelligence for that field, right? How is that person so much better than anybody else? The final or the second last slide, he talks about or she talks about all the other things that they've done and where would they want to go. How does the university help? It says that he's read through XYZ and that she wants to ensure and assert that the university could propel the applicant in the direction of cancer research because they have the right teachers and the right resources to do so. Then the child finally mentions about that how much does he or she know about the university and that he wants to pursue his research in translational cancer research, well acquainted with everything that the university is doing. He says or she says the specific laboratory in your university that he or she has researched on has focused on signaling mechanisms that is very much in line with the type of cancer research the person wants to do. And then he mentions about, see the last thing, he mentions about how he or she is going to add value to the university. How is he or she ensuring the university becomes a pioneer in research in cancer? Here is where he or she is trying to focus on, right? Finally, to conclude, he or she mentions that they believe the education of opportunities that I will get as a research or TA will equip him or her to achieve his goals. And of course, my decision to apply to the program stems from the goal of becoming an independent investigator. Finally, make sure you spend the most amount of time on an SOP. Like I mentioned, take down bullet points, and then finally make sure you make first draft, second, third, fourth draft, no spelling errors, and get at least 7 to 8 men and women who you trust and who know you to proofread it. All right, now I will take your doubts and your questions. Yes, ma'am.
So, those are some really helpful suggestions, Praneeth. And I wish I had known while I applied for my college admissions. Okay, but the students in the audience, you need not to worry about your SOP or LOR if you enroll with UpGrad for your education abroad. Right from your SOP to other critical assessments like IELTS, you will be receiving complete assistance and guidance from our admission team and our team of instructors. Your UpGrad academic curriculum shall have a study abroad module embedded in it to prepare you for all the academic and professional success. Praneeth, so what all programs can our students choose from UpGrad?
Right. So from the past 5 years, what we've been trying to do is we're trying to leverage online learning in making sure that we're trying to democratize higher education, but also making it more accessible. Now what we're doing is we're trying to make sure that we can make physical higher education abroad more inclusive, more democratized, more accessible, especially more affordable. So here's what we're doing. We're trying to make sure that students now have a choice of spending 2 years in India trying to leverage online learning to save up the cost of their higher education abroad. And then for the final 2 years or for the final 3 years, they can transfer to the host campus university abroad and finish the degree. The most special part is that the entire degree is going to be conferred upon from the host university abroad, shall be treated equally to any standard degree holder that is studying in the campus from day one. So we're doing masters and bachelors both. We have some of the finest business schools in India, like so you can do a dual degree in your masters from Triple IT Bangalore, and then you go to IU Germany to finish your degree in data science. So and we have the chance for these students who've stepped right out of high school to finish 1 year in India and then move for the last 2 years to James Cook or to highly esteemed universities like Deakin in Melbourne, or they can spend 1 or 2 years in India and then move to some of the best Canadian universities and US schools. So this is what we're trying to do to make sure we can leverage online learning as much as we can to make sure everybody who's here with us can access higher education abroad and can access some of the biggest and most exponential growth opportunities abroad, like any other student who finishes their degree abroad. Plus, they can actually attain dual degrees through us.
That is great, Pranit. I mean, see, you get to, spend a lot of time in foreign and you can save money at the same time. So I think that is a fantastic opportunity for all the students out there. So can we quickly take some questions? Here we have Kainath asking us, can we get a copy of this presentations, please? Will a recording be sent? I hope that you like the presentation so much that you're asking a copy of it. Sure. And the session will be recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. So please follow that. So one more question from Nit Jan here is, can you come again? What is the difference between SOP and motivational letter?
So there are different ways of how the university tries to assess you, right? A motivation letter more or less means your letter of intent. Again, especially if you're applying into masters, it has to be very formal, should talk about everything that I just mentioned. Writing or mentioning it or trying to label it as a motivation letter is almost the same things as SOP or letter of intent or anything that they may want to call. Make sure you're reading the question very well that they're trying to ask, so you know how many of the components that you're trying to put in have to be extremely formal, have to be extremely relevant, and to what extent do you have the liberty to talk about yourself a little more than you can in your SOP, right? So make sure that you read about the rules and what are they actually asking you to submit, right?
Okay, thank you. So we have one more question from the anonymous attendee here.
Sure.
The question is, can we include if we have published any review articles in the SOP?
You should, but as long, see, there are two reasons of why you do it. One is to talk about your scholarly pursuits, your scholarly ambitions. That is something else, but you can certainly do that, but then talk about the number or make sure prior to you applying, you can post at least 3 or 4 in your forte. But if it is relevant to the field that you're studying, make sure you explicitly talk about it in the SOP. Where has it been printed? What law journal or business journal? And who did you research with, if you did? And what sources did you use? And by source, I mean, what was the experience you went through? If only mention the source or, the revelations that you had, if you feel it can, you've reached some breakthrough or you've advanced the level of where you could have been at this age within that field. So I hope you got the point. So it depends if you want to explicitly talk about it or if you just want to mention your scholarly ambitions, right? Mention it fully if it is in the field.
Sure, got it. So
yes, please go ahead. So
we have one more question.
For some kids here, or for some students here who are asking for a statement of purpose, I'm just going to share a file. I'm not sure if you can do that. Yes, I can do that. So they can just go through this. It's a simple PDF file. This is the file from where I took down the last set of slides of how the applicant had expressed his intent for cancer research, right? So you can go through it as a sample. Yes, ma'am, please tell me.
So we have a question asking whether the SOP should be different for people applying in India, Indian schools and schools in abroad.
Right. So it is not a question of that. It is more about the culture, the opportunities, the campus, the external reality of that country, the status of scientific research or your industry status there, where it stands right now. All of it you have to factor in all of these things to compose the right SOP, because no country will have the same set of external or industrial or internal realities as a university campus. Not all of them will give you the access to the same kind of opportunities. Not all of them will have the same amount of individuals that you can do research under and with. Not all of them will have the same kind of masters or majors that you are choosing, and not all of them will have the area of majors or specialization that you want to pursue, from which your experience is more relevant. So it depends a lot on the local reality of the school. But if you want a better tool, then the better tool is always to study what is the university asking you as a general question, right?
So here we have one more question for you, Pranit. Pranit sir, what were your extracurriculars when you had applied to University of Pennsylvania?
Which is a very relevant thing to ask. So it is a long list, but when I began my college, I signed up for a not-for-profit. I visited and worked and researched in 25 countries across the world prior to when I was 22 years of age. I had started up 2 firms in the US and India. We had reached almost $8 million in revenue within 2 years. I had set up a school here in India for training students with a better sense of experiential leadership development. I had almost sort of led 3,500 individuals in teams, almost 250 teams across the world when I was 25. So I had done a lot in that field. And when I applied to UPenn, I applied in global education entrepreneurship. And both the companies that I had started in India and the US, they were both educational firms. So that helped a lot. And my experience with being a leader, or with leading international teams, that helped me a lot. But also the scale of impact. I talked a lot about numbers. I hosted spaces for leadership for 3,500 individuals. 250 people were there in my team. I have been a part of almost I have served almost 150 different clients. So numbers play a lot of part, and the variety of experience, but only in that field, right?
So I think we have reached our time, but can we take 2 more questions? 2, 3 questions.
I have all the time in the world right now. Tell me.
Okay, great. That's great. And I mean, kudos to your experience, man. I mean, I can't think of someone who can accomplish so much in, at a very young age.
Thank you. That's very kind.
So we have a question from Abhilasha asking, how many months before do we start writing the SOP?
Abhilasha, if you are really genuinely invested and you want to get into a great school, and you're not joking here, at least 3 to 4 months prior, because you actually, in my experience, the 4th or 5th draft is the actual letter that you actually send out to the university. So of course, 3 or 4 months prior to the application deadline, but make sure whoever taught you in the past in college or in school, or anybody who you follow as a general leader who is accessible to you, anybody who comes from that field in which you're trying to pursue your degree, anybody who knows about your life, all of these individuals, at least 5 or 6 of them, read through it. Sometimes they even remind you of some of the biggest things that you can mention, which skipped your mind. Because on a broader scale, those things matter a lot, right? But at least 3 or 4 or 5 months prior, because you have to put down or condense 20 years or 22 years of your life into 2 pages. And sometimes, you know what? When you start writing it early, you realize you don't have enough to write. So that gives you enough time to do stuff. Maybe you go to our site and do some free courses, some paid courses, go to edX, Coursera, anything that you would like to do, but have enough information to talk about. 3 or 4 months starting prior would also give you the access that even if you want to research enough, or you want to sort of get a research paper done with somebody from your university, you have the time to do that as well. So, so the more earlier you start, the better it is.
Got it. So we have one more question. should I mention why I choose a particular country as well, apart from writing why a particular university?
Country, as long as it is relevant to talk about it. So, for example, you don't necessarily have to explicitly say that you plan to live there, you plan to settle there, XYZ. You can talk about things that how does that country offer you a conducive opportunity to fulfill your research or to progress or advance your goals. Why is that country the right stimulating environment, conducive environment? Why does it have some of the most intellectual, intellectually high or bright brains in that specific field? Who do you want to work under? Which company do you want to serve? And which company would not mean you randomly speak about any, you will randomly write about any company. So for example, if you're doing mechanical science and you want to work for SpaceX or Tesla, talk about some challenges that SpaceX's industry or the any industry of any company like Apple, Tesla, anything, what are the challenges or problems their industry has reached a halt with or are trying to break through with? How is it that you want to be a part of such a huge mission and problem? How can you solve it? So like that, you can probably mention about certain things that are missing in your country, but a company in maybe in the US, which is trying to reach a breakthrough, and you want to be a part of that team, right?
Praneeth, I think we have answered almost all the questions. And people, if you have any more questions, we have noted all your queries here. Our academic counselors will reach out to you and will explain things in detail. So, Praneeth, that was such an informative session. Thank you so much. And there are many comments in the chat box telling that, it's always good to hear from you, Praneeth, sir. Today's session was really informative. And I think it is really informative and helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There's somebody who's asked, should we do PG diploma after Masters from India? So here's the best thing about how we go about this. Through upgrad.com, you get to finish a PG diploma as well as a master's degree with us. So you get a dual certification within 2 years, 1 year in India and 1 year in Germany from one of the best schools in Germany in some of the most advanced fields like AI, data science, management. So you have a chance to do both through us and get your PG diploma course credits recognized in the university in Germany. So that was the last bit. I thank all of you who were here with us. You've been such a patient audience. Make sure you reach out to us if you need any advice at all. Thank you very much. Please visit our website to know more about what we do. And hopefully you will join us in our mission to make higher education more democratized, more inclusive, more affordable. And hopefully you will be one of our learners soon. Thank you, everybody.